In today's video we're going to talk about my Leica 50mm 1.4 Summilux SL lens. That's quite a mouthful, isn't it? And welcome back to another video. For those of you who are new around here, I'm Brad and I'm a professional photographer based in the southwest of England. I've been a working photographer for 15 years and shoot a mix of corporate events, commercial PR and weddings. My background is working as a news photographer in London, but I've since relocated back to the southwest. So I thought coming into 2020 it'd be worth just doing a bit of my first impressions, a bit of a review and what I think of this lens. First off, this is by far the biggest 50mm lens I've ever owned. As a Canon shooter, I had all three of the Canon 50mm lenses at one point. I had the 1.8, the 1.4 and then the 50mm 1.2L series lens, which was a beautiful lens, although suffered really bad chromatic aberration, and by the end of owning it after 6 years it was full of loads of internal dust. This lens, however, so far has no internal dust in it. It's fully weather sealed and it's testament to the design and the build quality and the engineering that Leica put into all of their equipment and the fact that it's been hand assembled. So if you look at this lens from a distance, you probably wouldn't think it was a 50mm prime lens. It's got a really large lens hood, a really big 82mm filter size on the front as well. I found shooting with this lens has been a little bit different than I perhaps expected. Whenever you try something out in a shop, you never really get the proper understanding of what something is like when you're out and about using it day to day. This lens reminds me very much of the Canon 85 1.2 lens, which if you ever had a go with that, you'll know that it's slow of autofocusing, but when you get it, it's on the money and it's beautiful, and that's kind of the case with this lens. At 1.4, this lens is incredibly sharp. There's no chromatic aberration and the fall-off's beautiful. On the Leica website, it says the Summilux SL 51.4 aspherical is designed to deliver a maximum optical performance and establishes a new benchmark and standards in terms of sharpness. And I think I'd agree with that. Out of all the 50mm lenses I've owned over 50 years, 50, I meant 15. None of them have shot so well wide open. I found with the Canon 1.2, I really had to get it to 1.6, 1.8 to really start seeing the benefit and the beauty of that lens. Whereas this lens, I confidently look through and shoot pictures at 1.4 knowing that the final result is going to be absolutely stunning. With my Canon glass, I noted that if I had to stop it, I'd have to stop it down a few stops to really get the most out of the lens. And so far, with any lens I've put on my SL, be it the 75 or the 24-90, that's simply not been the case. I've never owned a set of lenses that have been beautiful wide open. If you're buying this lens, you're going to want to shoot it wide open and you're not going to be disappointed. 1.4 is letting a lot of light in and it's beautifully sharp, but the autofocus is slow on this. I found that I've used this lens mainly for the group portraits at weddings, the couples pictures when they're together. I've used it in low light situations like a church, but I've had to really be quite thoughtful about the way that I'm shooting with this lens. I need to really make sure my composition's right and really make sure that I've got the camera pointed at exactly what I want it to focus on. Which I know sounds a bit silly, but there's no kind of run and gun with this lens. As you can really get away with the 75. You can pull this camera up to your face with the 75 on it and just take pictures and it'll snap straight onto what you want to photograph. This one not so much. I found that this lens works best with the one stop using the back button on the back of the SL, just the little knobble here, and I found that that's given me the best results. Now, one downside of this lens is that it's heavy. It's a large lens. It's a large lens and it's heavy, but it does balance well on the camera. And this haven't really found, it is obviously heavy, but because it balances so well on the camera, I've not really found it an issue to work with over 12 hours. Now, I guess there's a question that why do I own a 75 and a 50mm because the focal lengths are so close together? Well, I like the compression you get out of the 75 being a mid-range telephoto lens. I find that, as I mentioned in my previous video, it gives me a little bit extra length, but it's not too long. The 50, actually, when you're using them side by side, the 50 is a lot wider than 75. You could argue that, well, perhaps you should crop in on your 50, Brad, to give you a similar 75 look, or make the picture a bit narrower. But I'm not really into that, to be honest. I'd rather have the correct lens and shoot the image as it is. On my Q, I always shoot that at 28mm. I don't ever use the crop function on it to kind of crop into the image. At the moment, I'm really happy with this, and I'll certainly hold on to it. I like having that wider aperture to let a bit more light in. I love the beautiful fall off on it, and I just love how incredibly well built this is. If we compare these lenses side by side, you'll see that there is a notable difference in size. The 50mm there and the 75mm there. I find that more often than not, I will shoot without the lens hood on this lens, just because it really does make it just that little bit more compact. I have thought about getting one of the older rubber collapsible lens hoods for this, just to offer a bit of protection and just to be able to offer a little bit of, you know, just to stop the glare. However, I can't say I've noticed any issues with glare. No issues with chromatic aberration, no purple fringing, nothing. This is a triumph. To have a lens that is not only at a 50mm focal length, but to be shooting at 1.4 without any chromatic aberration is amazing. I think if you're considering this lens, it's well worth popping to your nearest Leica dealership or the Leica flagship store in London to have a go with one. It's not a lens that you're going to use to photograph sport or any fast-moving action, but what you are going to use this lens for is beautiful portraits or a considered landscape. This lens will deliver the best picture at 1.4 that I've seen on a 50mm lens. I absolutely love this, but I also love my 75. And seeing how well this works I'll be really curious to see what the 50 Summicron's like.